I gave my family 15 years of my life. I built their company back up from nothing. I gave them my salary, my time, my loyalty, and I gave the woman I loved my entire heart. In return, they let me take the blame for a crime I didn't commit. They took my name off the company I saved. And on the night I finally understood what they really thought of me, my own stepbrother pushed me off a balcony and called it an accident. I died in the rain, alone, while the people I loved celebrated inside. But death wasn't the end of my story. It was the reset button. Because when I opened my eyes again, I wasn't in a hospital, and I wasn't in a grave. I was 26 years old again, standing in my father's office on the exact day my life first started going wrong. And floating in the corner of my vision, glowing faint gold, were 4 words that would change everything. Reversal system. Activated. This is the story of how I stopped being someone's stepping stone and became the one thing this family could never survive. The first time I lived through this day, I stood in my father Richard Cross's office and listened to him tell me, calmly, like he was discussing the weather, that the board had decided to make my stepbrother Daniel the public face of Cross Holdings. "You're better behind the scenes, Ethan," he'd said. "Daniel has the charisma. You have the numbers. We need both." I remembered believing him. I remembered smiling and saying, "Of course, Dad," even though I'd spent 6 years pulling the company out of near bankruptcy while Daniel golfed with investors and took credit in press releases. This time, I said nothing. I just watched him the way you'd watch a stranger, waiting to see what kind of man he really was when he thought no one was paying attention. "You're quiet," Richard said, frowning slightly. "Just thinking," I said. Behind him, invisible to anyone but me, a small notification blinked into existence. System: foreknowledge advantage detected. Task available: the quiet rebellion. Objective: do not accept the board's decision without securing a formal equity stake. Reward: corporate insight skill, level 1. In my old life, I had let this moment slide because I trusted him. This time, I understood something my old self never had. Trust wasn't a gift my family deserved. It was a debt they'd have to earn back, one broken promise at a time. "Actually," I said, "if Daniel's going to be the face of the company, I want 15% equity and a formal seat on the board. In writing. Today." Richard's expression flickered. Surprise, then something colder. "Since when do you negotiate with me?" "Since I realized I never have before," I said. "And look where that's gotten me." He didn't like it, but he needed me. He always had, he just never said it out loud. And by the end of the day, I had my equity stake in writing, notarized, filed. Task complete. Reward granted. Corporate insight skill, level 1. You can now identify undervalued assets, hidden liabilities, and manipulation in financial reports with perfect clarity. Small, almost invisible. But it was the first stone in a wall I intended to build so high that no one in this family would ever be able to push me off anything again. I want to be honest about something, because this story doesn't work if I pretend I was always clear-eyed. In my first life, I loved Vivian Shaw for 9 years. She was Daniel's fiance's best friend, university sweetheart turned business partner, turned, eventually, the person I trusted most in the world, right up until the night I found her in Daniel's apartment 3 weeks before our own wedding. She hadn't looked guilty. That was the part that broke me. She'd looked inconvenienced, like I was a scheduling conflict. "You were always going to lose everything, Ethan," she told me later, after the affair was public and I was already being quietly frozen out of the company. Daniel is the one people believe in. I just picked the winning side early. I died still loving her, which is its own kind of stupidity. This time, when she called to invite me to lunch 3 days after the board meeting, I almost declined out of old habit. Then the system pulsed again. System, relationship analysis unlocked. Scanning. Vivian Shaw, loyalty. Index, 34%. Hidden motive. Detected. Financial dependency on Daniel Cross's rising influence. 34%. 9 years, and I never once saw the number underneath the smile. I went to lunch. I watched her order my favorite wine without asking. Watched her lean in and laugh at things that weren't funny. Watched her mention, casually, so casually, that Daniel had been so stressed lately and could really use my help closing a deal with a supplier named Marcus Webb. In my old life, I helped. I always helped. I closed that Marcus Webb deal personally, using contacts it took me 4 years to build, and Daniel took full credit for it in front of the board 3 months later. This time, I smiled and said, "I'll think about it." Task available. Withhold the advantage. Objective. Do not personally close the Webb deal. Reward. Business network expansion. Level 1. I didn't close it. Daniel tried on his own, fumbled the negotiation badly, and Cross Holdings lost the supplier to a competitor. For the first time in either of my lives, I watched my father's golden son fail publicly. And I watched Vivian's expression when she realized her plan hadn't worked. Task complete. Reward granted. Business network expansion. Level 1. Access to a hidden directory of investors, suppliers, and industry contacts previously unknown to you. The system didn't just give me foresight. It was starting to give me leverage, real, tangible tools that hadn't existed for me the first time around. Because the first time around, I'd spent all my energy protecting people who were quietly working against me. I met Mia Torres on a Tuesday in the records basement of Cross Holdings, 3 weeks into my second life. In my first life, I never went down to the archive floor. I had assistance for that. I never met Mia at all until my final month alive, when she was the compliance officer who tried, quietly and at great personal risk, to warn me that financial records were being falsified under my name. I didn't believe her back then. I was too deep in my own collapse to see a lifeline when it was handed to me. She was fired 2 weeks later, right before I died, and I never even learned what happened to her after that. This time, I went looking for her early. "You're the CFO," she said, startled, when I appeared in the archive room asking about supplier contracts. "CFOs don't come down here." "I wanted to check something myself," I said. "Contract 4471-B, the Meridian account." Her face changed, carefully, like someone deciding how much to reveal. "That contract has irregularities. I flagged it 8 months ago. No one followed up." System. Character scan. Mia Torres. Loyalty index. 91%. Integrity rating. Exceptional. Hidden talent. Detected. Forensic accounting. Untrained. Recommend recruitment. 91% loyalty to a company that had never once rewarded her honesty. In my old life, I'd surrounded myself with people who smiled at me and lied. This woman had been standing in a basement the whole time, telling the truth to no one who would listen. "Show me everything you flagged," I said. "All of it. Today." She looked at me for a long moment, like she was trying to decide if this was a trap. "Why?" "Because I think someone in this company has been stealing from it for a long time," I said. "And I think you're the only person who's noticed." That was the moment everything really started to change. Not because of a system notification, not because of some engineered advantage, but because I finally chose to listen to the right person instead of the loudest one. Task complete. Recognize real loyalty. Reward. Granted. Ally bond established Mia Torres. Bonus. Reward. Forensic financial skill. Level 2. Over the next 6 weeks, Mia and I went through 8 years of supplier contracts, shell payments, and consulting fees that led, eventually, to a private account controlled by exactly one person, Daniel Cross. In my old life, I had been so busy holding the company together that I never once questioned where the leaks were coming from. I assumed incompetence. It wasn't incompetence. It was theft, careful and slow, disguised as bad luck and market conditions. Nearly $4 million over 6 years, funneled out through fake logistics partners and laundered through Vivian's side consulting firm. The 2 people I had trusted most in my old life had been quietly bleeding the company dry while I worked myself into an early grave trying to save it. "If you take this to your father now," Mia said, spreading the final report across the table, "Daniel goes to prison. This isn't a boardroom problem anymore. This is criminal." I thought about that for a long time. In my old life, I died protecting these people. I took blame that wasn't mine so the family name would survive. I never got an apology. I never got the truth. I got a shove off a balcony and a closed casket funeral my own father barely attended. System. Decision point reached. Options. A. Expose immediately. Full justice, high family conflict. B. Delay exposure, build leverage, control the narrative, maximum long-term advantage. I chose B, not out of mercy, out of strategy. A man who's already been humiliated once doesn't get to be impulsive twice. "We wait," I told Mia. "We build the case airtight. And when we move in a way that leaves them nowhere to hide. Not the board, not the press, not the family." Word of my quiet success started spreading through the company faster than I expected. 3 new supplier deals I'd personally structured outperformed projections. My equity stake, worth almost nothing on paper, a year,
earlier had tripled in value as Cross Holdings' actual performance began separating from Daniel's inflated public image. Daniel noticed. Of course he noticed. He cornered me outside a board dinner, smiling the same easy smile he'd worn in my old life right before he ruined it. "You've been busy," he said. "Making yourself useful. That's good. Someone has to handle the boring stuff while I run the vision." System. Provocation detected. Emotional response suppression recommended. In my old life, this comment would have stung for days. This time I almost laughed. "Funny," I said. "I thought the vision was supposed to include actual profit." His smile thinned. "Careful, Ethan. Dad still decides who leads this family." "Does he?" I said. "Or does the board? Because last I checked, my 15% plus the investors I brought in personally might actually outweigh whatever charisma you're selling this quarter." I walked away before he could respond, and for the first time in either of my lives, I saw real fear cross Daniel Cross's face. Task complete, established dominance, reward, granted, investor confidence. Plus 20%. She came to my apartment 2 nights later. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt the old pull, the habit of 9 years of loving someone who never really existed the way I imagined her. "I know things have been tense," Vivian said, sitting across from me with wine she hadn't been invited to bring. "I miss how things used to be between us, Ethan. Before, all this corporate stuff got so complicated." System. Manipulation. Attempt detected. Confidence level, 96%. "What do you want?" "Vivian?" I said, tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. She hesitated, then dropped the act with startling speed, the mark of someone who'd never actually respected me enough to keep pretending. Daniel's scared. The board's starting to whisper. If something happened to hurt the family right now, a scandal, an audit, anything, it would destroy everything we've all built. We, I repeated. You still care about this family, she said. I know you do. So whatever you and that little archive girl are digging up, bury it. For the family. For us. There it was. The exact moment, word for word, almost identical to a conversation in my old life where I'd folded, apologized, and quietly let a $4 million theft disappear because I was too in love to see straight. This time I stood up and opened my front door. Go home, Vivian, I said, and tell Daniel that if he wants to talk about burying evidence, he can do it with a lawyer present, preferably his own because mine already has copies. Task complete. Refuse the bait. Reward, granted. Emotional immunity, passive. Manipulation attempts by known betrayers will now be automatically flagged with full clarity. She left without another word. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something quieter and more permanent. The sense of a door closing on a version of my life I no longer wanted to live. 6 months into my second life, I called an emergency board meeting. I didn't ask my father's permission. I didn't loop in Daniel. I simply used the equity stake I'd secured on day. One, the stake my old self never would have thought to demand and exercised. My legal right to convene the shareholders directly. Mia sat beside me with a locked case full of documentation. Across the table, Richard Cross looked at me like he was seeing a stranger wearing his son's face. And in some ways he was. 6 years ago, Cross Holdings began losing money through a series of supplier contracts that never quite made sense. I used to think it was market pressure. It wasn't. I laid out every shell company, every falsified invoice, every wire transfer traced back through Vivian's consulting firm into Daniel's personal accounts. Nearly $4 million, I said. Stolen from a company I nearly worked myself to death trying to save. By my own brother. System. Public exposure task complete. Reward. Granted. Reputation overhaul. Board trust rating. Plus on 65%. Daniel tried to speak. Nothing came out. My father's face went the color of ash. This is a mistake, Daniel finally managed. Ethan, you're twisting numbers. I have forensic documentation from an independent auditor, I said, nodding to Mia. Cross-verified by 3 outside firms. This isn't a family disagreement anymore, Daniel. This is a criminal case, and it's already been filed with the SEC. I watched. In real time, the version of my life, where I died protecting this man's secrets, get erased and rewritten into something entirely different. Richard asked to speak with me alone after the board meeting ended in chaos. Daniel escorted out by security at his own request, ostensibly to cooperate fully, which we both knew meant his lawyers needed time to strategize. You could have come to me first, my father said quietly. Staring out his office window. I did come to you first, I said. 15 years ago, when I first started noticing problems no one wanted to hear about. You told me I was better behind the scenes. So I stayed behind the scenes and watched, while your favorite son robbed you. Blind, he flinched. It was, I realized, the first time in either lifetime I had ever seen my father genuinely flinch at something I said. I built this company back from near bankruptcy, while Daniel took the credit, I continued. I gave up 9 years to a woman who was helping him steal from us, and I did all of it quietly, because I thought loyalty was supposed to look like silence. System. Emotional closure milestone reached. Task available. Set terms. Not requests. Reward. Executive authority. Upgrade. I'm not asking for an apology, I said. I'm telling you how this works now. I want full operational control formalized in writing this week. Not because I want revenge on this family, because I've earned it twice, in 2 different lifetimes, and I'm done being asked to prove that a 3rd time. My father looked at me for a long moment, really looked, the way he hadn't in 15 years, and for once, he didn't argue. Done, he said quietly. Task complete. Reward granted. CEO authority. Cross Holdings. System objective progress. 78%. The scandal broke publicly 2 weeks later. Not because I leaked it, but because the SEC investigation made headlines on its own. Daniel was charged with corporate fraud and embezzlement. Vivian's consulting firm collapsed within days as clients fled a company facing federal scrutiny. I want to be honest. I didn't feel joy watching it happen. I felt something quieter. Relief, maybe. The particular relief of a man who spent one entire lifetime believing he deserved what happened to him, finally understanding that he never did. Vivian called me once more near the end, her voice raw in a way I'd never heard before. You destroyed us. No, I said. You did that yourselves. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences. I hung up, and for the first time since I woke up 10 years in the past, the system interface shifted, not a task notification, but something new. System primary objective. Break the cycle. Complete. Secondary. Objective unlocked. Build something worth keeping. Mia was still working in the archive basement the day I came to find her, even though by then she could have had any position in the company she wanted. You could ask for a promotion, you know, I said, leaning in the doorway. CFO's about to have an opening. I hear the current one's about to be very, very busy running the whole company. She laughed, a real laugh. The kind I'd never once heard from Vivian in 9 years. Is that an offer, Mr. Cross? It's an offer, I said, for the job. And I hesitated, feeling something my old life had never given me room to feel safely. And for dinner, if you're interested in both. She considered me for a long moment, the same careful, honest way she'd looked at me the very first day in the archives. I already told you everything true I know, she said. Seems fair you get a turn. System. Final objective, choose someone real. Complete. Reversal system. All primary objectives fulfilled. System closing. Thank you for completing your second chance. Ethan Cross. The glow faded from the corner of my vision for the last time. And for once, I didn't need it to tell me I'd made the right choice. My father stepped down as chairman 2 years after the trial, quietly without ceremony. Daniel served 4 years and now works, I'm told, in a small logistics firm 2 states away, under a name that isn't Cross. Vivian I never heard from again, and I've stopped wondering whether that bothers me. Cross Holdings is worth 4 times what it was when I first died outside. Its front doors. Mia runs finance with the same relentless honesty she had in a basement. No one used to visit. We have 2 kids now and a house nowhere near my father's old estate. Because some kinds of freedom you have to build for yourself. Brick by brick, mistake by mistake. I used to think my first life was a tragedy that ended too soon. Now I understand it was never really an ending at all. It was the first draft. Messy, painful, full of people who never deserved what I gave them. This time I finally got to write it right.